Very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. It is 10 a.m. once again, meaning that it is time to analyze the day's Hindu newspaper. So I welcome you all to this session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. This is where we analyze both mains and the prelims worthy articles from the Hindu newspaper, and in the end we also give you homework for a couple of questions that you should write on your own. As you know, we have a student answer writing portal as well, where you can submit all these answers, you can see each other's answers and give feedback to each other. I really hope that you are doing that as well. Now, without any further ado, let's see what are the articles that we will be discussing in today's Hindu newspaper analysis. Before we do that, once again a quick reminder, we have an ongoing free crash course running for all of you on YouTube at 7 p.m. We have all these classes lined up. Today is 24th of May. So today will be second class of Indian Economy, followed by Indian Economy Class 3, International Relations, Class 1, Class 2. I hope you have been attending all these classes. If you have missed out on any of these, please do see those. In these classes, we revise in the form of question answers. So we have taken up some important questions that have a probability of being asked in the prelims, and we discuss those to make you revise as well. This will go on till 11th of June, so just in time to be completed before your prelims examination. Now, these are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. First, we'll be discussing about China-Europe relationship. Recently, there was a visit from Xi Jinping to Europe, where he visited multiple European countries. Now, the implications of Chinese visit to Europe are multiple. What is it that it holds for China? Why is Europe so important for China? And its implications for India as well. How would India be impacted with China-Europe relationship? That is what we'll be discussing. Second article, should doctors be kept out of Consumer Protection Act? Now in India, we have a Consumer Protection Act. For example, if you're a consumer, you ask for certain services, the person could not provide you that service, or you are not satisfied with that service. You can go and file a complaint against that person. That is a provision of Consumer Protection Act. Should the doctors be included there? Meaning that if a patient is dissatisfied with the services of the doctor, if the patient is not happy with the doctor, can the patient go to the courts, go to the authorities against the doctor under this act, or that is a matter of debate. Then from prelims point of view, we will be discussing first, microplastics are found in fish in the Ashtamudi Lake. Not a good sign. Microplastics are everywhere now. Even in the marine life, even in the deepest oceans, we are seeing some evidence of microplastics. Then India is looking to ensure that we have as much relationship as African countries, where we are trying to explore mineral wealth. And then in the end, Kenya and US, how the relationship has grown. The head of the state of Kenya is in the US. Kenya has just been given the designation of a major non-NATO ally. What does that mean? What is it that US is trying to do now? Are they trying to make a more assertive approach towards Africa? This is what we'll be discussing. So let's start with the first article. As I said, the first article is about China-Europe relationship. The reason why it is written, or the background of it, is that the Chinese President Xi Jinping was on the visit to Europe, and he visited 3 countries in Europe specifically. He visited France, he visited Hungary, and then he visited Serbia. So these are the 3 countries that he visited. Now, whenever there is a foreign visit, these are all very well planned. Countries where your leader will visit are not chosen randomly. There are reasons why those countries are chosen. France, for example, has been emerging as leader in Europe. If you remember, before the Ukraine-Russia war had started, it was a French President, Emmanuel Macron, who had met Vladimir Putin multiple times. Even after the war started, he has been trying to negotiate and mediate between the two. So France is emerging as that country that is trying to lead Europe now. What about Hungary? Hungary is an interesting country because although it is a part of EU, but its leaders usually don't align with other European countries. For example, Hungary is one of the few countries in Europe that support Russia. They don't speak against Russia as such. Not just this, when Europe decided that they will open their borders to immigrants coming in from Africa, to immigrants coming in from Middle East, Hungary was one of those countries who said that no, we will close our borders, we don't want anyone to come from outside. So Hungary in that sense, be although it is a EU country, but does not behave very much like an EU country, and it is pretty close to China. China has invested a lot of money in Hungary. And the same is the case with Serbia as well. Serbia is a small country in Eastern Europe. These are countries where China has invested a lot of money. One more thing before we go deeper into this article. See, whenever you say Europe, we know it's a pretty rich place, very rich continent, rich people, high standard of living. But please understand, when you say Europe, Europe has two parts, like Western Europe and Eastern Europe. So when the image in your mind, or the image that you have in your mind, is of rich European countries, rich people, very high standard of living, those mostly are West European countries. So when people usually go and visit for a holiday, etc., most of them prefer going to Western European countries. Western Europeans are the countries are the ones that have a much higher standard of living, much more per capita income. Countries such as France, Germany, Spain, UK, all these countries, Switzerland, Italy, all of these are a part of West Europe. In East Europe, you have other countries. It's not that they are poor, but yes, relatively not as economically strong. Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, these are the kind of countries, Serbia, these are the kind of countries in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe, and again, try and imagine this geography, Eastern Europe means much closer to Russia. So from Russia, if you start moving towards Europe, you'll first go to Eastern Europe, then you'll go to Western Europe. So this is the background of it. Now, as I said, these places are chosen very, very carefully. Where will Xi Jinping visit? Where will he not visit? They specifically chose France, Hungary and Serbia for a reason. It is also an important visit because Xi Jinping, ever since COVID-19 pandemic has started, has not had many foreign trips. You would remember he did not even come to India for the G20 summit. There may be different reasons for that, but the reality is that after the COVID-19 pandemic, he has restricted his movement drastically. It was his first trip to Europe. He went to Russia, but in 5 years it was his first trip to Europe because, again, as I said, his movement has been restricted considerably. There can be various reasons for that. We'll not go into that. But in that background, going to Europe to visit multiple countries, that signals a big, big thing. Now, we'll discuss why is it that coming close to Europe is important for China and what is it that Europe thinks of China. Let's first talk about Europe. What do they think about China? Just like USA, the fact is that Europe's point of view on a lot of matters is the same that US has. It may be because US pressurizes them, forces them because of common connection, but USA, whatever their point of view is, becomes a similar point of view to EU as well. For example, most of the European countries are of the view that China is dumping its products in Europe. China is a threat to a lot of European companies. I'll give you a simple example. There is a big issue with EVs, that is electric vehicles. So China has emerged as the leader of electric vehicles around the entire world. While the entire world, when I talk to you or when I say electric vehicles, the first car that might come to your mind is Tesla, right? So the first thought that you have is Tesla. But the reality is Tesla is not the largest electric car manufacturer in the world. You know which company that is? That is BYD. BYD of China. That is the biggest electric vehicle company in the world. It has its cars being sold in India as well. Now, obviously, Chinese cars or Chinese products are much cheaper as compared to European companies. A few years back, at least, there was this perception that even though Chinese products are cheaper, they are not of great quality. But the reality is, if you look at Chinese products in the past few years, their quality has been improving drastically. Look at the BYD cars. The BYD cars earlier were not considered to have great quality or great style. Now they look very good. They have a lot of options available. Their quality is also improving. And this is something that Europe does not like, because if cheap Chinese products start entering Europe in large numbers, it will mean that Europe's own companies that sell a product at a higher price will not be sold. It's a very simple calculation. If a Chinese car imported to Europe will cost, let's say, 50 lakh rupees to someone in Europe, and the local car will cost 75 lakh, majority of the population will go with a cheaper option, as simple as that. That is why US also is trying to restrict flow of technology into China. US has imposed a lot of restrictions on what kind of technology can their companies share with Chinese companies, because US does not want China to go ahead and win this technology race. This is something that Europe is also doing. Now, when Chinese president met with the French president, something very interesting happened. French president, one day before the Chinese president visit, again these are all planned, this is how diplomacy works. Just one day before the Chinese president visit, French president had a meeting with Tibet's so-called prime minister. Now, Tibet does not officially have a prime minister, but they have something called a government in exile, means a group of people who claim to run Tibet's government from outside Tibet. So French president met with the prime minister in exile of Tibet. This was done specifically keeping in mind China. It is a signal to be sent that, see, we are not afraid of you. We still regard Tibet as a separate, independent entity. Chinese obviously did not like it, but the Chinese went to France because they wanted French markets to be opened up, so they did not make a big deal about it, but China was not happy about this. France and other European countries, on the other hand, don't want Chinese EVs to come to Europe in such large numbers. They want to protect their own car manufacturers. The focus that China is putting is on Hungary. As I told you, Hungary is a very interesting case study in Europe. It is a European country, it's a part of EU, but does not behave like EU. In the sense that the leaders who usually win in Hungary are much more right-wing leaders, much more hardliners. They have been speaking up against migrants coming into their country. They have openly supported Russia as well. They have spoken up against sanctions on Russia. And this is one of those countries that is actually in favor of China as well. China has invested a lot of money in Serbia and Hungary. In Serbia, Chinese invested $5.5 billion in copper mining, steel processing plant. In Hungary also, they are investing a lot of money in building infrastructure. Hungary is the closest ally of China within the EU. That is why Chinese visit to Hungary was so important. Now, China has one thing that many countries, including India, don't have. That is, they have a huge foreign reserve. And with that foreign reserve, they can actually influence a lot of countries, which they usually do. Since they have a lot of foreign exchange, they can throw that money around in the form of loan, in the form of line of credit, by imposing such conditions that will be in Chinese favor in the long run. We saw what happened in the Hambantota port. We see what happens in countries such as Ecuador, etc., where Chinese loans have become so much that the government is not able to repay that money, and the Chinese have started to occupy that infrastructure. Look at what happened in Djibouti. A lot of these countries have seen this. The question again is, if the countries know that this is what the Chinese do, why do they keep accepting Chinese loans? See, the answer is simple. Don't think of it from the point of view of the entire country. Think of it from the point of view of the leader of the country. Let's imagine Sri Lanka. Why would Sri Lanka take such a big loan from China when they know they can't pay it back? Don't think Sri Lanka took that decision. Think Rajapaksa brothers who were in power, they took that decision individually. Because they thought that, let me bring in the money, people will be happy, they will vote for me, I will be in power. So it's a very short-term way of thinking where leaders think that at least I will come back to power no matter what happens in the future. And that's how the Chinese debt cycle continues to happen. Now, China has tried to attract Eastern European countries to it. It knows that attracting Western European countries is difficult. Western Europe is much more closer to USA. Chinese had also started something called 17+1. This is China plus East European community. They wanted to have meetings between Eastern European, so Hungary, Serbia, all of these are Eastern European countries. China thought it would be easier to come close to them rather than coming close to Western countries now. The other question is, why is Europe so important for China? That Xi Jinping has visited Europe, he is visiting these, and even though French president is meeting with Tibet prime minister, China is still not saying anything about it. The reason here is Europe is the richest market. See, countries around the world, and it includes India as well, are always in search for rich markets, because we want our companies, our sellers to be able to actually produce goods and sell goods in the market where rich people live. Just for context, do you know the entire European continent I'm not talking about a country, entire European continent. Do you know its population? Just take a guess. The entire population of Europe is not even 80 crore. It's less than 80 crore. That is the entire Europe population. So it's again nowhere close to India. But the reason why it has so much importance around the world as a market is that per capita income of people is very high. People are able to spend more money, they have more spending capacity, and that is why everyone wants to sell their products in Europe. So China, India, all of them are looking to forge a relationship. India, that is why, also wants to have free trade agreement with Europe. Chinese products, as I said, are improving in quality. They have already cracked the code of how to price their products lower. With improved quality, China thinks that it has a much better chance of selling its products in Europe now. Now, let's go slightly one step ahead and see what will be the impact of this relationship, that is Europe-China relationship on India. How would India react to it? See, India obviously faces a very challenging situation to balance out our interest between Europe, US, Russia, China. There is no country in the world where we say that no, we don't talk to them. Maybe except Pakistan. But no major country in the world or no major bloc in the world is a no-no for us. So we have to balance it out. The trade and security impact with respect to China would directly impact us. See, countries such as France have always stood by us whenever there is a conflict with China. They have not directly interfered, but they have always supported us at the international stage whenever India-China conflict has started. But if China comes close to France or China comes close to European countries, our support from that part of the world may decline. That is a major cause of concern. Then there is influence of US. US obviously would not want Europe to have a close relationship with China. Because if that happens, Europe may become soft on Russia as well, which is something that USA does not want. India, on the other hand, has improved our relationship with Europe. On the other hand, we have very close relationship with France. Now, the example of close relationship can be seen from this year's Republic Day. As you all know, original guest on Republic Day parade was supposed to be the American president. He did not come at the last instant. Now, when all of the world knows that we invited someone who did not come, so the next person that you invite can say, oh, I will not come. I was never your first choice. Why will I come? So in that scenario, for the French president to accept the invitation, saying that I know American president did not come, don't worry, I'll come on short notice. That highlights how close the relationship between India and France is right now. India also recently has been looking into economic groups such as EFT, such as European Union, EFTA, etc. India has been trying to forge relationship with the Nordic countries, with the Baltic countries as well, because again, we are also eyeing the European market. Before we jump on to our next one, I also wanted to give you a slight comparison between where India stands and where China stands as when it comes to trade. So let's look at EU-China trade for now. Please understand, I'm not talking about Europe-China trade, it's EU-China trade. So EU does not include all the countries of Europe. Majority of them are in EU, but a handful of them are not. So let's talk about EU-China now. EU-China trade in 2022 was this: 626 plus 230, that is in billion, so about 856. So lump sum $856 billion was the EU-China trade. Let's compare this with India. Now, if you look at this, again financial year 2022, India-EU trade was 64 plus 51, or let's say 65 plus 51, so close to $116 billion only. See the comparison here. China EU 856, India EU 116. So again, almost 7.5 times. Almost 7.5 times. That is the difference between the market availability that we have for EU and China has for EU. That is why we have a very, very, very long way to go and catch up. Next article is about Consumer Protection Act. Now, what is this article all about? Recently, that is this month only, Supreme Court gave a very interesting decision. Supreme Court said that lawyers are or cannot be complained, or they are not a part of Consumer Protection Act, meaning that lawyers cannot be held liable under this. For example, you hired a lawyer, you gave him or her money, the lawyer lost the case. You cannot go to the court saying that I am a consumer, I was not given the best services, I gave him the money to win the case, he did not win the case. So this is the logic of Supreme Court saying that lawyers are not liable under the Consumer Protection Act. Now again, the article is about doctors. Regarding doctors, the Supreme Court did not give a definitive statement here. However, the interesting part is, in the past, Supreme Court has said that doctors have to be under the Consumer Protection Act. There was a famous case of Indian Medical Association versus VP Shanta, in which the court said that doctors, medical professionals, hospitals do come under Consumer Protection Act as service providers. Now this is a big point of debate. Think of it from the doctor's point of view. Doctors in India anyways face a lot of challenges. You see, every few days there is a news article that relatives of the patient passed away or something happened, relative of the patient attacked the doctor, they attacked the hospital. If you think of it from the doctor's point of view, even if they try their best, even something may have happened because of lack of infrastructure, the doctors have to face the brunt. Being a doctor in India is not easy. I know all of us keep on saying, oh, this doctor earns so much money, that doctor earns so much money. And that is true. People at the top of their profession in any field will earn a lot of money in reality. So whichever profession that you choose, if you're in the top of your field, you will earn a lot of money, and as some doctors do. But that is not the case with all the doctors. Doctors have a very, very, very tough life and very tough profession. Their requirements are very tough. There is no time period for their emergency purposes. If some case comes in emergency, they can't be unavailable. So the entire question is, should consumers or patients or their relatives be allowed to file a case or file a complaint against a doctor by saying that I was not given the kind of services that I expected? This is the case. Now, this article basically presents different points of view. You can take your own point of view. This is an opinion piece. So let's see what are the pointers that this article has given. First, this article says that doctors cannot be equated to other service providers, and the reality is every human body is different. If there are two patients who come in with same symptoms, that does not really mean that both of them will have the same disease. Even same symptoms can have different diseases. A lot of times you go to a doctor will ask you to get 10 tests done. Some patients go and have those tests done. Some patients say, oh, this doctor is very bad, he is making me spend so much money, I will not undergo all these tests. The doctor wants to be sure so that you don't blame the doctor, but then that obviously increases the cost for the patient. So there has to be a balance between the two. If you are expecting the doctor to narrow down to the exact problem that you have, it would require a lot of tests, a lot of diagnostic tools. For that, money has to be spent. That becomes a problem. If you don't want to pay the doctor's fee or the hospital's fee, a lot of patients just complain so that they don't have to pay the fee. It's a kind of a blackmail tactic that has started now. They'll tell the doctor, I'll complain against you, I'm not happy with you, you will have to, or there will be a damage to your reputation. In return, make sure that I don't have to pay the hospital bill. If you forgive my hospital bill, I will take back my complaint. These are the tactics that many consumers also resort to. That is a problem in India. Now, it's not that if a doctor does not do their job properly, they will not be punished. We do have Indian Medical Council Act of 1956 that talks about misconduct of doctors, that talks about if the doctor is not being able to do their work properly, they will be punished. National Medical Council has the power to award compensation to patients for the injuries that they have sustained. So it's not that there is no provision for punishing or for taking that doctor into notice if they did not do something properly. That is why, as per one of the authors, there is no point of putting so much pressure on the doctor that you will be charged in the consumer court as well. Now, if you look at the Consumer Protection Act, there are some issues available here. First issue is, even if a complaint is filed, it may take up to 10 years for that complaint to be resolved. You file a complaint against a doctor, the doctor will have to keep on giving proof what happened, what did not happen. It might take up to a decade. Can we afford that? Can we afford that in a country where doctors anyways are in a short supply? Can we afford that to dent the confidence of the doctor, that for 10 years or for 8 years you just have to go to the authorities and keep on giving explanation, giving clarification what you did and what you did not do? The Doctor Association themselves have an authority who can view these cases and who can look up whether something wrong happened or not. See, negligence on the side of the doctor does exist. In every profession that is the case. You will have every profession where there will be some professionals who are not doing their job properly. But the fact is, are the judges the best people to understand that, or professionals from that field only should understand that? It's similar to the concept of tribunals. Just like we have, for example, Central Administrative Tribunals, CAT, etc., where you have senior civil servants only hearing the case rather than judges only. That is again similar to doctors hearing cases or complaints against the doctors and not outside mechanisms. Can we have any alternative mechanisms? If not going to consumer court, what can we do? The author says that yes, we can have a body where matter can be taken to first rather than going to the consumer court. Maybe the consumer court can be the last option available, but at least at the first stage, we need to have something else so that if the patient really has a complaint, they can go there. The complaints can be resolved in a timely manner rather than putting a lot of pressure on the doctors by taking them to the court. So just to summarize, the present status is doctors are under this act. That is, doctors are liable. If a patient is unhappy, the patient can complain against the doctor in the Consumer Protection Act. That is the current status right now. The entire article is a debate around should it continue, should it not continue. So most of the points are no, it should not continue. Doctors should not be in this. Just like lawyers have been taken out of this, doctors also should not be in this. Now the Consumer Protection Act, the original version was in 1986, but in 2019, a new refreshed law was introduced to replace the old law. In the new law, we have a Central Consumer Protection Authority that acts as a regulator of the law. Complaints can be filed in a consumer court where the complainant works or complainant lives in that area. Consumer can also seek for compensation for the harm caused. In the earlier law, there was no provision of compensation as such. How much punishment can be given? At the district level, 1 crore. National level, it can go above 10 crore as well. Under 2019 law, even e-commerce companies are covered under it. You would have seen a lot of cases where people order iPhone from Flipkart or Amazon and they receive a Vim bar or a Rin bar or whichever you prefer. So these people can also approach these courts under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. Under the law, these are the rights that a consumer has. Right to safety, that you will not be harmed by the product or the service that you have taken. Right to information. Right to choice at competitive prices. Right to have a representation. Right to seek redressal if something wrong happened. Right to be educated, and right to basic needs. All these are the rights of the consumers under the Indian law that exists right now. These are the two articles from the mains examination point of view. Now from the prelims point of view, the first article that we have here is a bad news from the famous Ashtamudi Lake in Kerala. As you can see from the photo, no surprises that microplastics have been found in fish in the Ashtamudi Lake. Now, this is not the first time. In fact, deep ocean studies have also suggested that even in ocean fish, we have started to see evidence of microplastics. What exactly are microplastics? First, understand that plastic fragments less than 5 millimeter in length. So do remember, these are microplastics. The smaller the size of the plastic, the harder it is to get rid of, the harder it is to recycle. So microplastics are very small. They can go into the body, human body or body of the fish, and that is how they can actually have a very disastrous impact on many organs, circulation of blood, etc. This Ashtamudi site is a Ramsar wetland. It is in the Kollam district of Kerala. Do remember that. The study found out that there were microplastics in this lake's fish, shellfish, even sediment, and in the water as well. Fish accounted for 19.6% microplastics found in this area. Now, there are a lot of different sources of microplastics. For example, it can be, let's say you just threw away a bottle or threw away any plastic waste in the lake while you were visiting there. Over the time, it will degrade, it will break into smaller pieces, but when it comes to such a small piece that it can be ingested by the fish, that becomes a problem. So those are microplastics. It can also be leftover fragments of fishing nets. So in a lot of areas where fishing happens, fishing nets, a piece of it may be broken and that gets disintegrated and it turns into microplastics by disintegrating further. So these are some of the sources of microplastic. That is why it's important to keep plastics and this pollution away from these water bodies. As per the study, hazardous heavy metals were also found apart from microplastics. Fish included nylon, polyurethane, polypropylene, all these were found in the fish in this area. Heavy metals included molybdenum, iron, barium, all these were detected in the surroundings. And again, it is a Ramsar site, means it has to be conserved at a much higher level as compared to others. And even then, if at a Ramsar site, we have a situation where microplastics exist in such large quantities, that means it is a major cause of concern. Globally and within India, there are some initiatives being taken to fight against microplastics. Let me give you an example or some examples of global initiatives against microplastics. We have something called the Global Partnership on Marine Litter. It was launched in the Earth Summit in 2012 as a part of the Manila Declaration, where the countries agreed to form policies to reduce and control wastewater and pollution from fertilizers. Similarly, we have the Glow Litter Partnership Project, launched by FAO and IMO to prevent and reduce marine plastic from shipping and fisheries. We have the London Convention of 1972, very old, one of the first ones to talk about marine pollution. It talks about prevention of marine pollution by dumping waste and other matter. It was signed so that the dumping of waste material into sea stops. We also have multiple plastic pacts. These are business-led initiatives to transform plastics packaging value chain into something that is much more sustainable. First plastic pack was launched in UK in 2019, where the big companies agreed that they will try and change their plastic packaging, turn that into something much more sustainable for the future. The next article that we have here is India's efforts to ramp up collaboration with the African countries. Africa is a continent that is a lot in news, and countries around the world, including India, France, US, China, Japan, all of them are trying to forge relationships in Africa because of the mineral resources that it has. It's often called as a dark continent. It's known by different names. Africa still remains a continent where exploration of minerals has not happened to such a large extent, because in Europe, etc., when industrial revolution started, most of the minerals were exploited. From Asia also, Africa still remains a continent where a lot of minerals still remain unexplored, and that is what attracts different countries. China has been the leader in forging partnership with African countries because of the money that they have, the investment that they can put in. India, on the other hand, is also trying to make as many partnerships as possible in Africa. As you know, in the G20 summit that India hosted, we played a major role in ensuring that African Union becomes a part of the G20. Similarly, we have had many MOUs since then. MOU means Memorandum of Understanding. So we have MOUs with at least 8 African countries for their mining collaborations: South Africa, Mozambique, Congo, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, Cote d'Ivoire, and Zimbabwe. They have important critical minerals including copper, cobalt, niobium, graphite, etc. Now the interesting part is, when you are a country that knows that you have something that everyone wants, like African countries, let's say Congo knows that it has cobalt that everyone wants, so it will obviously try and get the best deal possible. When you have something that everyone wants in the market, you will try and get the best deal out of it. So it's no surprise that these countries, the African countries, tried to get the best bargain out of India, China, US, Japan as much as possible. China has been the first mover here. It is estimated that China controls 8% of Africa's resources. And numbers have gone up. This was a number estimated in 2018. Now, from Indian point of view, something very interesting has also happened that many Indian companies have a very good market in Africa. For example, companies such as Bajaj, TVS, they sell a lot of bikes in Africa. Then Airtel, it's a major telecom provider in Africa. So there are a lot of Indian companies that have a big market in Africa. So it's not that Indian companies don't have a base there. Indian companies are very familiar with the business environment there. Ever since the world has started to move towards EV and this new technology, chip manufacturing, etc., the demand for these minerals has increased even further. For example, cobalt, copper, lithium, etc. The Congo-Zambia region is the key area for nations that are looking to extract these minerals. Few West mining companies have also come up here. They have invested a lot of money. They have bought certain copper belt areas as well. Many of these companies, because these are private companies, they can sell their stake to other companies when they get some profit. So a lot of American companies have even sold their stakes to Chinese companies. For example, in 2009, a Chinese company was sold a large part in Africa in the copper cobalt belt for its production by an American company. So again, these are private companies and not really held by the government. See, understand the difference here. When you say China is exploring mineral resources, when you see China getting into Africa, most of these are government companies. Or if not government, they are somewhere controlled by the government of China only. On the other hand, when you say American companies are in China, or American companies are exploring minerals American company exploring minerals in Africa, American companies in most cases will be private companies, not government companies. So they may or may not listen to their own government. They will not work on the orders of the American government. These are private companies in America. They will work according to their own interest. China's case is different. In China's case, the companies will obey by the orders of their government. So you will not see a Chinese company selling their land in Africa to Americans. While an American company, because it's a private company, is looking for its own interest, may very well sell their stake to China. That is the big difference. And that is why Chinese expansion is at a much faster pace, because it is driven by Chinese government. American expansion you will not see being driven by the American government as such. What about India? What have we done? As I said, we already have MOUs with about 8 African countries. We have a lot of summits with Africa, including inviting African Union into G20. We have the India-Africa Summit as well. In Tanzania, India is looking to get resources such as niobium and graphite. In Zimbabwe, we are looking to explore lithium. In Congo, Zambia, we are looking to capture copper, cobalt as much as possible. But again, we are competing with bigger countries, China, America, that have much more money in their bank. India is trying to use its one-on-one connection, our soft power, our historical connections with Africa to make sure that we also get the best deal out of it. What about China? China controls over 5% of cobalt processing facilities in Congo. They also own other mines as well. For example, they own about 80% in the Tanke Figuru mines, which produces 12% of the world's resources there. Apart from that, they have 95% stake in a cobalt and copper project. Again, this all requires huge investment. And because Chinese have that kind of a money, that gives them a big advantage as compared to India and other nations around the world. Also, I would like to share with you some of the good steps or positive steps that India has taken in its African collaboration. We have been helping African nations for a very long time. India runs the ITEC program, under which we give a lot of help to Africa by offering scholarships to their students, by building campuses, by building hospitals, etc. Every year in our budget, we have a sum of money set aside for African countries. This year's budget also, we had kept 200 crore rupees aside for African countries for their help. India has been investing a lot more money and selling a lot of stuff in Africa. I gave you an example of Bajaj, TVS, how their bikes are famous in Africa. We have also been a source of medicines for Africa. Africa still has a lot of diseases that do not exist in other parts of the world. Since India provides medicines at a much cheaper cost as compared to other nations, India is a country which can help Africa counter all these problems, and we have been doing this in the past as well. In terms of defense and technology also, we have been collaborating with them. In 2022, we had the first trilateral maritime exercise with Tanzania and Mozambique. We also have signed MOUs with African nations on Indian Ocean Rim and ensured that we will be helping Africa with their defense training and development. We have also been helping Africa to set up Pan-African e-network project. We have been helping them set up fiber optic project to improve their connectivity through satellite, telemedicines, etc. IGNU also offers its courses in Africa to students who would not be able to afford expensive courses. So there are a lot of collaborative efforts here between India and Africa. Hopefully it will turn into something good when India asks to return the favor for mineral wealth and mineral production. The last article for the day is the visit of Kenya's president to America. In this visit, America has given the title of major non-NATO ally to Kenya that they have given to a few countries. Kenya will become the first sub-Saharan African nation to get this designation. Again, not the first African nations. There are already some nations in Africa, a couple of them who already have this tag. Kenya will be the first sub-Saharan African nations. Currently, it is a designation held by 18 countries, including Ukraine. India is not a part of it. Interestingly, Pakistan is, by the way, Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally. India is not. Non-NATO ally basically does not mean that America will come and protect if they are harmed. It does not. It's not equal to NATO. That an attack on you will be attack on all of us. No, nothing like that. It's more of collaborating on more issues. It's just a status given so that it can tell the world that see, we two are friends with each other, so you better not mess with them because we are closer and we will be collaborating with them. It comes at a time when US is also looking to expand into Africa, looking at the increasing Chinese investments. Every country is now getting nervous because Africa also is looking into those countries which can send them money. Chinese investments in Africa is increasing. Similarly, Russia also has been supporting a lot of paramilitary groups in Africa. A lot of African countries in the past few years have seen military overthrows. There are military coups that have happened in Africa, and many of them are being supported by Russia, something that America obviously does not like. The interesting part is American president did not visit Africa during his tenure, although he had promised it, which did not really go well with the African countries. On the other hand, Africa has, or US even withdrew its troops from countries such as Niger, where civil wars have broken out. Meaning that the importance of Africa in the minds of America has been declining in the past few years. That empty space, that empty vacuum is now being filled by China. America wants to rectify that. That is why they are inviting these American or African leaders rather to their country to have these collaborations so that they can set a good example. One other thing that was talked about here was the fact that developing countries are going into a lot of debt. Countries such as Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, all of them owe a lot of money to China. We have seen in our next door neighborhood, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, both have a lot of debt to China. The problem is a great part of their tax revenue, which they should use for building infrastructure, it just goes back to China. So a lot of money that you collect in the form of taxes, it's just a loan repayment to China. So your own capital infrastructure is not being built. China does not forgive its debt. China's debt conditions are always very, very, very hard. If at the market you are getting loan at 4%, Chinese loan will be at 7%. Because China knows that you are coming to them because no one else is giving you money. If someone else would have been giving you money, you would have gone there. China knows that you are in desperation. That's why you're coming to them, and they do take advantage of it. Take the example of Kenya. Kenya's debt to GDP ratio is over 70% right now, and most of it has to be sent back to China. That's why most of their tax revenue, most of the money that they collect goes back into China, and that is a big problem. Please do understand what's a major non-NATO ally. It's a country with which America has strategic working relationship. Again, it's not a military alliance as such. It does not automatically constitute a mutual defense pact. It is right now with 19 countries, including 3 in Africa. This does include Kenya. So including Kenya, this is with 19 countries. Kenya is the first sub-Saharan African countries. As I told you, just next door, Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally. India is not. Do remember that. That brings us to the end of this session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. A couple of questions for your practice. First question on China-Europe relationship, and second question on why doctors should or should not be a part of the Consumer Protection Act. Try and write these answers, submit them to the student answer writing portal. The link is in the description of the video. You can give feedback to each other and learn from each other's mistakes. Do join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the next session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.